again, everybody. I'd like first off to apologize for the technical problems we have. Apologize to Mr. Barrow and to the public for the failure we just had. I'll try to start again. The Commission of Inquiry into the Sale of Government Assets is convened today, and I'd like to start by reminding everybody of the reasons why we're here. And from the instrument of appointment, it's to inquire into the sale of government assets, specifically to investigate the procedures and processes for the sale of government assets during the period October 2019 to November 2020, to determine whether proper procedures, practices, and applicable rules and regulations were duly observed in the sale of such assets, and whether all sales were made transparently, to determine whether the proper practices for the sale of government assets were within the ambit of approved or established policy and were carried out without waste or abuse, to determine whether any improprieties, irregularities, or wrongdoings occurred in the sale of the said assets, and whether there was any fraud, corruption, mismanagement, waste, or abuse in the sale of such assets, and if so, to identify the persons responsible, to identify the weaknesses in the sale processes, if any, and to recommend corrective measures to ensure transparency and accountability at all levels, to recommend any action that may be taken against any defaulters for transgression of the established rules, practices, and procedures, and for commission of any other act of impropriety or wrongdoing, and to hear and determine any other matter relating to the above. We have our first witness with us, former Prime Minister Dean Barrow, Senior Counsel. Do you wish to swear or affirm?
I will swear.
All right. We have the oath there. Should be, yes. Do you, Dean Barrow, swear that the testimony you shall give today before the Commission in the matters in question shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do so swear, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this morning, Mr. Barrow. I'm not sure what the protocol is. Maybe you can set me right. How do we address the former Prime Minister? I think you retain the title of Prime Minister.
I think that is a practice developed by the current administration. In the times before, in the many times before when they were the government, I think they established a protocol so that even after demitting office, people were still referred to as ministers. The ex-prime ministers were still referred to as prime minister. For me, it really doesn't matter, sir.
All right. I'm comfortable with Mr. Barrow.
That is fine for me.
Thank you. As the terms of reference indicate, the first function of the Commission is to investigate the procedures and processes for the sale of government assets. But before we proceed on that, could you, for the record, just state your name, address, and confirm for us, of course, that you were former Prime Minister, Minister of Finance over the period October 2019 through November 2020?
Dean Oliver Barrow, sir. 6038 Seashore Drive, Belize City, and I had the great privilege and honor of having been Prime Minister of this country between the years 2008 and 2020. February 2008 to November 2020.
You were also, of course, Minister of Finance during that time.
Indeed, sir.
Indeed, yes. Do you agree with me that the authority to sell government assets resides with the Minister of Finance?
Or with the Ministry
Or with the Ministry
of Finance?
Yes.
The Financial Secretary is, of course, the accounting officer of the minister, of the ministry. In effect, he's the principal accounting officer of the entire government, although there is an accountant general, and there is also, as a constitutional backstop, the Auditor General.
Yes.
But in terms of the Ministry of Finance, it is the FS who is the principal accounting officer. And while, without wishing to preempt you, Mr. Chairman, we are going to get into the details of how the system operated. Let me just, if you will allow me, give you this quick and immediate synopsis. Concentrating first on the sale of government vehicles. This process resulting in the sale of such vehicles would move from the vehicle care unit and the person in charge, who during the period you're looking at was Mr. Ruperto Vicente, to the financial secretary. Thereafter, it would come to me. In the normal course, again, talking initially about vehicles, in the normal course, government departments and government ministries would write to the vehicle care unit indicating that a particular vehicle had crashed or had, for one reason or another, become disabled, was not in, for the most part, running condition, or even if a particular vehicle was in running condition, the ministry or department would indicate that it would run in fits and starts. And as I recollect, in cases where the ministry or department felt and could justify their feeling that it would simply be too expensive to try to put a vehicle that had clearly seen better days into a serviceable state of repair, where the ministry or department felt that that was simply too expensive, that would be one of the bases on which that ministry or department would write to the vehicle care unit. Now, it may be, if you will forgive me, what is meant to be a light-hearted comment, it may have been that in some cases departments and ministries were a little too eager to treat vehicles as unserviceable and to write them off, because the corollary to a write-off by a ministry or department was that they would require a replacement. In any event, sir, that was how this process operated. After a particular vehicle would have been surrendered to the vehicle care unit, and in a lot of cases the files I saw when they ultimately came to me would contain pictures of the vehicles to be written off and sold. After the vehicles were deposited on the lot or premises of the vehicle care unit, a lot I have never visited in my life, I'm not even sure where it is, the head of the vehicle care unit would certify to the financial secretary that we have vehicle X or vehicle Y there's an application from the particular department or ministry for this to be got rid of for whatever we can obtain for it. The financial secretary would then indicate his agreement with the vehicle care unit that in fact, in the circumstances, trying to dispose of these unserviceable vehicles and trying to get whatever government could in the circumstances was the way to go. It is after all that had been done that I would come into the picture. The vehicle care unit, by way of Mr. Vicente, would write to me through the financial secretary. So there were two layers of backstop for me. So Mr. Vicente would write to me through the financial secretary to ask for my approval to waive the boarding of these unserviceable vehicles and to agree to the sale of those vehicles. In some cases, as I recollect, he would indicate that people would be invited to make offers for the vehicles. In other cases, the letter would come to me saying that if I agreed, already an offer or offers had been received, and Mr. Vicente, with the approval of the financial secretary, would recommend to me that a particular offer for the particular vehicle be accepted. Now, Mr. Chairman and members, part of what was sent to me would be an indication, either implicit or explicit, that we were not going to do any better than the particular offer or offers received. The center would, in fact, again, either explicitly or implicitly, certify that we were selling for the best price that we could obtain in the circumstances. I would then note on the letter that came to me from the center via the financial secretary my approval by way of putting a date and my initials under that date, preceded, of course, by the words, "I approve." Now, as far as I can recollect, 95% of vehicles sold by the government were sold in consequence of the procedure I have just described. Unusually, but periodically, there would be applications made to the ministry, and again I say the ministry because these applications always went to the financial secretary. for an officer in the public service who was retiring there would be applications for such an officer seeking to be allowed to purchase the particular vehicle he had been driving while being a public officer. My recollection is that, number one, I repeat, this was relatively infrequent, and number two, these requests would come from senior public officers who are retiring. In the cases of the disabled, unserviceable vehicles, no valuation of those vehicles, as I remember, was done by the Customs Department. One time when I had inquired, the FS had told me, well, Customs will not value wrecks or vehicles that are clearly well past their sell-by date and are pretty much useless. But in the case, in the few cases of public officers retiring, asking to buy vehicles that were in running condition, I certainly insisted that before we could agree to this sort of Parthian gesture, a valuation from the Customs Department needed first to be obtained. And if we agreed thereafter to sell, it could only be for the value put on the vehicle by Customs, or in some cases, because the financial secretary was no easy fellow, he would decide, I don't like the Customs valuation. I want to sell them for more than the Customs valuation. And I would not have any difficulty with that. Now, Mr. Chairman and members, that latter type of transaction arrangement happened, as I said, infrequently. Whenever, though, an election, a general election, was imminent, there would be a number of requests coming from ministers who did not feel for one reason or another, or were not sure that they would be returning, this matter of political fortunes, as we all know, is an extremely dicey proposition. So there would be not a stampede, but certainly an accelerated pace of requests from outgoing ministers to be allowed to purchase their vehicles. This is a practice honored time out of mind. Not a matter of trying to engage in any kind of equivalency. In 2008, when the administration I led first took office, we discovered that a number of vehicles had been sold to ministers of the outgoing administration. And because, as I say, gentlemen, we knew that this was par for the course, no particular noise was made about that. For the period that you are looking into, if I can concentrate, because now I'm talking about ministers and others whose service was coterminous with the tenure of the outgoing administration. So in the period leading up to the November 11th general elections, again, no minister or any other person wrote to me. Indeed, because we were aware that it was more likely than not that people would be making these requests, the Financial Secretary and I discussed this, and we thought we better launch a preemptive strike, because we were talking about especially unusual circumstances, especially critical circumstances where the finances and pretty much everything else of the country had been ravaged by COVID. The Financial Secretary therefore wrote a letter with my endorsement and blessing to the Cabinet Secretary to say, let ministers, chief executive officers, all know whoever comes next, there will be no money for replacement vehicles. So we will sell to outgoing ministers and chief executive officers no vehicle. And I'm sure when the Financial Secretary comes before you, he will produce a copy of that letter. Now, notwithstanding that letter, a couple of people who shall remain nameless did write to the Financial Secretary. I repeat, nobody wrote to me. I don't want to come off as though I was a big bad wolf, but I state this as an unadorned fact, Mr. Chairman. Nobody wrote to me. They spoke to me after they had written to the Financial Secretary. In the event, what happened? The president, the then president of the Court of Appeal, the Honorable Justice Manuel Sosa, either spoke to or wrote to the Financial Secretary, confirming that his 70th birthday was going to be on the 20-something of December, and that would be it for him. He would be retiring, his career as a Justice of Appeal initially, and then as President of the Court of Appeal was finishing. The government vehicle, the vehicle that had been assigned to him, he had been driving for 12 years. He asked Mr. Chairman and Commissioners whether he might be allowed to purchase that vehicle. As I said, he never spoke to me, he never wrote to me. And I'm not sure, Mr. Waite will clarify, whether he spoke to by phone or wrote to Joe Waite. But he made the request of the Financial Secretary, who did come to me. I will say, and stand foursquare behind this, I had absolutely no difficulty in telling Mr. Waite that as far as I was concerned, that was a request we needed to honor for all sorts of reasons. The long service of Mr. Sosa, who everybody will agree There are other things having to do with his stewardship about which everybody will not agree, but you can't find one dissenter. When I put to you and the public the proposition that this man had a first-class mind. But that apart, Mr. Justice Sosa, during his entire tenure on the Court of Appeal, refused to have any policeman assigned to him as security, and refused the offer of a driver to be paid for by government. Those two things over that 21-year period saved the government a great deal of money. In my view, it would have been churlish, mean-spirited in the extreme, not to have acceded to the request of Mr. Justice Sosa. So I told Joe, I certainly support it. Of course, be sure to get a valuation from customs. That was done, and the file then came to me, all done by Joe, the valuation, the communication with Mr. Justice Sosa, and then the file came to me with the usual request for the waiver of the boarding and for the sale to Mr. Justice Sosa of the vehicle for the price fixed in consequence of the customs valuation. And I wrote, I approve, and initialed and dated that. Dr. Carla Barnett, who was, as you know, a senator, and who was not coming back into government no matter what, regardless of the results of the election. Which results people like you knew to be a foregone conclusion, Mr. Chairman, but it didn't matter. Whichever way it went, Carla Barnett was not coming back. She spoke to Joe and then spoke to me and said, listen, I've been a consultant. Well, she served, as you know, all over the place. Vice President of CDB, Assistant Deputy Secretary General at CARICOM. She said, look, I'm going back out and I'll be on, in effect, my words, not hers, the mercy of the world. I would like to, I won't have the money to buy another vehicle in a better condition than the one I'm currently driving. I would wish for you to make an exception to the policy that you've laid down and allow me to purchase my vehicle. She made the point that when she had been financial secretary in the previous administration and she left, she was allowed to buy her vehicle at that time. Again, Mr. Chairman and members, I stand foursquare behind my decision when it was brought to me by Joe, when Carla spoke to me, to say, again, I thought her circumstances were exceptional and that she should be allowed to purchase the vehicle. Mr. Waite, the financial secretary, Joe Waite, had customs do a valuation and came to me and said, I think this valuation is too low. And Joe recommended that we sell to Dr. Barnett for more than the customs valuation, and that's what happened. Again, to follow through on that, the letter came to me officially from the vehicle care unit through Joe Waite asking for me to approve the waiver of boarding and the sale of the vehicle to Dr. Barnett. The only other case that was outside of that first procedure / protocol that I described, having to do with the disabled or unserviceable old vehicles. The only other exception in the run-up to the general election came by way of a request from the then Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Ugo Pat. Again, the Deputy Prime Minister went directly to the Financial Secretary, who came to me. I spoke to the DPM and I said, but you know the policy anyway. I thought that also as a special favor, I would agree, and I so indicated to Joe Wade. What happened thereafter, though, was that the usual requirement from me that there be a customs valuation so that we could document that we were not selling for any undervalue did not happen. And I don't know whether it was because that didn't happen or whether there was some other reason, whether it just fell through the cracks. But that one did not come to me for my formal approval. Now understand that I'm not trying to, in any way, act like some artful dodger. I have said, and I repeat, that orally I had agreed. And if it had come with a customs valuation, I would have affixed my initials behind the words I approve. But it did not come. So, properly speaking, I never approved that one, even though I had freely communicated to the Financial Secretary that I was prepared to approve. Thus, and to conclude, Mr. Chairman and members, in the result, there were only 2 vehicles in that run-up to the general election that I actually signed off on after the process as set out in terms of the continuous practice of the Ministry of Finance, after the process of the head of the vehicle care unit writing to me via Joe Wade and making a formal request with all the facts contained in his letter to me after that process had been followed. I think, Mr. Chairman, I will stop there and be perfectly happy to take your questions.
It's a convenient place because the next question I had for you is whether or not the steps you outline is a subject of regulation, financial regulations, or is it a matter just of practice?
As far as I never inquired, as far as I understood, it was a matter of practice, but regulations may well have applied. My understanding is that these finance and stores orders are for the public service. And the gatekeeper, the guardian, so to speak, of compliance with these finance and stores orders is the Financial Secretary. So that I always had great faith in Mr. Wade, whom I knew and continue to know to be a straight individual, utterly professional, and a man of complete rectitude. I had great faith in him, and so I knew that the practice that I encountered and followed would have been based on more than a practice. But I say that it was good enough for me that Mr. Waite had made clear that this is the way it's done and properly done. And since the particulars I have described clearly constitute transparency, I was fine with that.
You relied on Mr. Waite's advice in this regard?
Yes, yes.
I've looked at those financial regulations and score orders, and while they deal comprehensively with procurement in terms of purchasing goods, there's a dearth of regulations regarding the sale of assets. The main regulations concerning that I was able to find, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is really Part 4 of the Finance and Audit Reform Act, which seeks to regulate sales of assets. Section 17 says, subject to this act, the government shall have power to acquire, hold, dispose of by sale or otherwise property of any kind, and all property owned by the government shall be held in the name of the government of Belize. And then subsection 2 says, the government shall have power to enter into procurement or sales contracts using either the limited tendering, the open tendering, or the selective tendering procedure. The language is in mandatory terms, and it does not appear to allow for sales otherwise than by the procedures described. Of course, in addition to that, there's provision for house approval for sales over $2 million.
And in terms of the tendering procedure to be used.
Yes.
Is there not a figure? I mean, you have to over $100,000. I don't exactly.
Yes, there are some thresholds
Indeed.
For additional approvals and additional requirements. But the
Mr.
general provision seems to apply to everything.
But Mr. Chairman, as a matter of practicality, there clearly is no way in terms of these, the plethora, the plenitude of unserviceable vehicles gathering in the premises of the vehicle care unit. There's no way you could put these things out to tender. My God, that would absolutely frustrate and cripple the whole process. And I would respectfully suggest that the Finance and Audit Act it clearly is not contemplating dealing with that sort of a procedure.
With unserviceable items?
Yes, yes.
Yes. I was able to find one regulation in the stores order that says the accounting officer shall have discretion, however, to sell articles held in unallocated stores at a price not less than 1 1/4 times book value plus appropriate customs duties, provided that the total book value does not exceed $50,000 on any single occasion. Otherwise, the authority of the financial secretary is required.
Well, in this case, there was always the authority of the financial secretary,
Yes.
even though you're saying that under 50,000, not even that was required. But all these unserviceable vehicles that were turned into Vicente by the departments and ministries, before they came to me, had to be signed off on by the financial secretary. From what you're telling me, they need not even have come to me.
Yes. Well, the difficulty I had in understanding that one was what is meant by unallocated stores. And it seems to me it means stores purchased with monies otherwise than through a vote under the budget. So unallocated monies, so to speak. I'm no expert, so I'm just asking for your input on what that's supposed to mean.
Well, I'm afraid that I can't help you. I would have to look at it forensically and try to come up with an opinion.
Yes.
But I do insist, Mr. Chairman, that as you've read it, it strikes me that indeed there clearly was a lacuna or lacunae, in which circumstances this practice, which, as I said, is honored time out of hand, grew up over years and years and years.
Yes. In terms of what actually happened now, apart from, I know you explained to us in relation to government vehicles, what about other assets? Save for land, of course, we're not talking about
Right.
land.
No, I don't recollect any case of my being asked to approve sale of assets other than land, except for the situation that arose with Senator Michael Perifit. Again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Senator Perifit never spoke to me. As I understand it, when I say he never spoke to me before asking to purchase some furniture, but we have spoken subsequently, and he explained that upon the prompting of his financial officer, or his finance officer in his ministry, he either wrote to or called Joe Wade about the purchase of furniture that, for the most part, he tells me, was furniture specially treated. I will need to be delicate. Furniture consisting of a couch and some chairs that had to be acquired with certain dimensions and size specifications in mind, and in addition had to be reinforced because of Senator Perifit's size and weight, matters that do not faze him. He's the first to make public jokes about his size and weight. But as I understand it, his finance officer said to him, "Why don't you apply to buy these things? Half of them nobody else can use. They were specially adjusted for you." And so in that context, he spoke to the financial secretary. The financial secretary, I don't think ever spoke to me, but I can't say the usual letter, because the usual letter from the head of the vehicle care unit had to do with vehicles. But a letter did come from the vehicle care unit saying that these pieces of furniture he was advising needed to be disposed of, and that there was this offer from Senator Perifit to purchase the furniture, and Vicente was advising me that the offer amount from Senator Perifit was, in his view, reasonable. This again had the backstop of the financial secretary. Now, I know that included in what was sold to Senator Perifit was a laptop.
And an iPad, I believe.
And an iPad. No, I don't think the same argument can be made. as is made with respect to the furniture. My understanding, and again, I preface this by reiterating my belief in the Financial Secretary, in Joe Wade. My understanding is that when Senator Perfeet asked to purchase the furniture, it is the FS who might have suggested to him, why don't you also ask to buy the laptop and, as you say, the iPad? And Joe will tell you, forgive me for calling him Joe, the Financial Secretary will tell you that a number of chief executive officers, the letter that he had written to the Cabinet Secretary for transmission to all ministers and chief executive officers, had to do with vehicles. The FS will tell you that a number of chief executive officers applied to be able to purchase their laptops, and I don't know if iPads were also on tap in that regard. And as I hear from him, it was in that context that he suggested to Perfeet, well, apply for the laptop and the iPad as well. I will tell you that except for the Perfeet lot, the furniture and the two devices, I was never approached to approve the sale of laptops to chief executive officers or to any other minister. The Financial Secretary, when I learned that, and he may have been the one who told me after it was a done deal, apologized for not having put me in the picture, brought me into the loop in terms of the laptops. But he said that in his view, people had their own personal, a la Hillary Clinton, their own personal emails and stuff on these devices unrelated to work. And he just thought that these were fairly small items and that it wasn't worth the trouble to get them back and to try to have these people wipe all the data, or to have the ministry wipe all the data and thereafter reassign the laptops to new CEOs. He felt new CEOs would want new laptops. So, but in any event, the bottom line is, as I say, the sale of the laptops, except insofar as Michael Perfeet is concerned, when it was bundled up with the items of furniture, the sale of laptops to chief executive officers never, ever came to me.
So that in some instances, the procedure you outlined did not always obtain.
Well,
there's a request to the vehicle care unit makes a recommendation to the financial secretary makes recommendation to the minister. That didn't apply in these instances.
In terms of the laptops?
Yes.
Clearly, sir. I didn't know about the laptops until, I believe I might have found out after the elections.
Is any regard had to the book value of these items when the decision is being made to sell them?
The laptops?
Any cars or laptops, property?
I don't know about the laptops, sir.
Yes, the cars.
In terms of the vehicles, I repeat that where the vehicles were not declared to me by the vehicle care unit and the financial secretary to be write-offs, to be unserviceable, to be not in running condition. There was certainly no effort made to get customs to do a valuation. And they explained to me that customs won't value a wreck, customs won't value a... So in terms of what substituted for that, you will have to ask the two other gentlemen. Joe had said to me, we have enough expertise in-house to do our own valuation. And certainly when the letters came to me, I relied on the valuation that came from the vehicle service unit, endorsed as it were, by the financial secretary. I don't think anybody could have expected, you know, domestically, I am accused of an inability even to change a light bulb. Well, I think that's harsh. But the truth is, when the system failed, and I heard you asking the technicians, have you done this? Those things are alien to me. In any event, even if they hadn't been in terms of the assessment of vehicles and placing values on vehicles that were not in running condition, that were unserviceable, I don't think anybody could seriously have expected that I would have gone, and these vehicles were plentiful, that I would have gone and said to the financial secretary and the head of the vehicle care, no, you take me to see these vehicles so that no, sir.
No, I think you misunderstand me. When the vehicles are purchased, they're purchased at a price, and then for accounting reasons, they're depreciated every year. So it's carried on the government's book at a value. And I'm asking if the books at which, if the value at which they were carried on the books factored into the decision any.
You would have to ask the
financial secretary.
The financial secretary, yes, sir. The accounting officer.
Yes. Also, in many instances, apart from the decision to sell, a decision was also made as to whether customs duties and other taxes were to be paid in relation to the items sold. Those were decisions that were made by the Minister of Finance.
Yes, sir, in this sense. In the few cases, or in the cases where I required a customs valuation to be done, that customs valuation was supposed to be the duty paid valuation.
But were there instances when exemptions were given on the payment of taxes? For instance, when the judge's car was sold, was he required to pay taxes?
That's what I'm telling you, sir.
Yes.
It is my understanding that the value, or that the price he paid, was the assessed value by customs, which was a duty paid value. So yes, inherent in that price was an element of duty in terms of what I was told was the process of valuation, in fact, engaged in by the Customs Department. Remember again, I never spoke to Customs. That really, I'm not trying to sound as though I was above it all, but you wouldn't have expected, naturally, the Minister of Finance to get involved at that level.
I'm trying to understand the process. Could the head of the vehicle care unit give tax exemptions,
No,
duty
sir.
exemptions?
No, sir.
What about the financial secretary? Could he approve exemptions?
In practice, when
Yes.
people wrote for, not talking now about the sale of vehicles, members of the National Assembly on both sides would write to ask for permission to import a vehicle duty-free. They wrote to Joe Waite, and it was Joe Waite who wrote them back. He would say, the Minister of Finance has approved. And so ultimately, I suppose, and it's not anything that I would try to shy away from, ultimately, I would approve, but it was Joe who, in fact, handled all the implementation processes.
He did it on your behalf, on behalf of the Minister
Yes,
of Finance?
yes, ultimately, yes, yes.
I have nothing further. Let me just ask.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely we're representing the Public Service Union, and so the explanation of the procedures must be raising the hairs of public officers, and the practice in 2008 when there was a new administration. It was because of the cry about corruption. And we all know that corruption stems from the lack of written procedures and to strengthen the legal framework. And it's not, it shouldn't be that we are going to, if you want to call it, gift to individuals who would say, have done, and I borrow one of your words, Herculean service to the country. We have to take into consideration that these people receive a salary, they receive allowances, they receive their gratuity, and so to sell off the national assets for, I don't have the figures, but we could imagine for remittance is not acceptable. And so we would have more, we'd want to hear why was it impossible to get some of these procedures in black and white, in regulations.
I don't know what you...
Yeah, so Mike, yes. So our concern is why didn't we follow the regulations and strengthen the regulations so that the financial secretary or the head of vehicle care unit just cannot sell off these assets.
Sir.
And as we go deeper, we'll find out that the procedures were not followed through all the way. The practice, let's say the practice, because the procedure is difficult for fine.
Well, if there are no procedures, then you can say that successive governments ought to have done more to put procedures in place. But I must take issue with the way you frame your remarks, sir. You are suggesting that people who were retiring were gifted these vehicles. Nobody was gifted anything, sir. They were allowed to purchase at the proper value, including an element for duty, that in fact was submitted to the ministry by the Customs Department. It was not a gift, sir. And I am saying to you that in terms of the outgoing administration, we can now only talk about 2 instances of persons being allowed to purchase their vehicles upon the coming to an end of the life of the last administration. One, Justice Sosa, I've said to you, but I will say again, remember that he's paying the book value, or he's paying the assessed value, the fair market value, number one, so it's not a gift. But recollect that in his case, he did not cause government to have to pay for the services of a driver. He did not cause government to have to pay for the services of a police guard. My goodness, man. I say that anybody who would quarrel without allowing him to purchase at a proper value the vehicle upon his leaving after 21 years and give him the extra mile that he had gone. Anybody who takes that view is churlish. is mean-spirited, and I stand foursquare behind that, sir.
Yeah, so let's go to the serviceable equipment that were sold off to the ministers and CEOs who are leaving office. And you have said that there were explanations that, oh, the incoming ministers and CEOs they would want new equipment, right? And so now you allow a man to carry home serviceable furniture. I imagine these furniture are not cheap. We don't know what's the amount. We'll get that figure from the FinSec. The iPads and the laptop, man, coronavirus has closed schools down. And so why couldn't we then give those equipment to the schools?
Mr. Martinez.
Right? Meanwhile, we wait for the promised equipment that were supposed to come for the schools. So
Mr. Martinez, I have told you, sir, that I had nothing to do with the sale of the laptops, except in the one instance of Perfeet where it was bundled up together with the... So listen, so you reserve, respectfully, you reserve those questions and those comments for the financial secretary, who freely accepts that he was the one who took it upon himself to allow CEOs to purchase the laptops. And in terms of Perfeet, that one exception, I've said to you that didn't start with me. I didn't initiate the process. He spoke to the financial secretary. But I will not apologize for thinking that, again, in his case, sure, he was getting paid. He was doing two jobs. He was Attorney General and Minister of National Security. But in terms of furniture that had been specially adjusted for him, given his dimensions, again, sir, I have to repeat my term. It is churlish to say that there is something wrong or something malodorous about allowing the man to purchase what I was told, for the most part, was furniture that basically was purpose-built for him.
PM, that isn't justifiable.
Well, that's your view, sir.
I'll tell you why.
And when you come to write your report, you can say that. As far as I'm concerned, it was entirely justifiable.
It's not justifiable for the public officers, because as a tailor, somebody who measures something, I could customize something for somebody big, and guess what? We could make it smaller. You could make big smaller, but you can't make small bigger.
Anyway.
So the justification for making care home the furniture, because
paying for it
was customized for how much? And so now my question to you: who does the FinSec answer to?
In the case of the laptops that he sold to the chief executive officers, the FinSec will answer to the public, to the Commission, perhaps to the Auditor General. He certainly would not have answered to me, because he did not tell me that he was in fact allowing CEOs to purchase the laptops. I say to you again, sir, we disagree, and you will produce your report and you will say whatever it strikes you that you need to say. But I will not throw any shade on the financial secretary. While I have to tell the truth and I have to state the facts, and for those reasons I make clear that he did not tell me that he was going to sell the laptops to CEOs, and no letter came to me for me to offer any formal approval I do not fault him. I do not criticize him. It would have been better if he had brought these things to me. And I will tell you, if he had, I would have approved. Lord, man, we're talking about laptops with people's personal stuff on it. Come on. But a matter for you, I am just here to tell you what my position is. And while I'm not in any situation that would oblige me to apologize on behalf of Joe Witt, he can take care of himself. I am telling you, just to make it absolutely clear, that I don't turn on people, and I don't desert people, and I don't leave people in the lurch, while Mr. Witt, as he will freely concede to you, did not bring the issue of the laptops to me. If he had, I believe that I would have approved. Okay?
Yeah, my final question to you is, if we were to do it again, would we go by the practice, or would put in procedures that would ensure that that we are not shortchanged at the end of the day?
But I don't think you were shortchanged, sir. I don't think you were shortchanged, and that's the short answer. And in terms of if we were to do it again, well, happily, I will never do it again, will I?
Thanks very much.
I am out of politics, I am out of government, and I am telling you that you want to make a judgment, history wants to make a judgment, the society wants to make a judgment, that's fine. Insofar as I approved the sale of the vehicle to Dr. Barnett, I stand foursquare behind that for the reasons I have already enumerated. Insofar as I approved in writing the sale of the vehicle to Mr. Justice Sosa, I stand foursquare behind that. Insofar as I approved the sale of the items of furniture, these are piddling for me in terms of the larger scheme of things. Piddling matters that have their own inherent logic and justification given the special nature of the furniture. I stand foursquare behind that. Insofar as the laptops are concerned, which I had nothing to do with, I will offer without, well, I suppose I have been asked, but I will offer again my own view that if you're going to hold Joe Witt's feet to the flame for that, really, sir, it strikes me that you are unnecessarily complicating things. You know, the chairman will be familiar with the principle of Occam's razor. Don't make things unnecessarily complex when they can be dealt with in a simple, straightforward manner.
Not good for right now.
Questions. In your view, based on the note that came from the vehicle care unit, again in respect to the sale of the furniture,
Yes, sir.
was that within the purview of the vehicle care unit, or was that an overreach?
Well, I don't think that it was an overreach. It was not even, well, it was unusual because I'd never seen anything from the vehicle care unit, as far as I can remember, that came having to do with anything other than vehicles. But I believe the FS will no doubt say that the vehicle care unit was used as the repository of the custody and care, and ultimately the mover in terms of disposal of assets. The vehicle care unit, I imagine, was used for more than just vehicles. So I don't want to, I can't recollect any other instance of anything coming to me from the vehicle care unit that had to do with other than vehicles. But I can't tell you as an absolute certainty that nothing came. I don't think so. And on the face of it, you hear the term vehicle care unit and you would think that their remit would be confined to vehicles. But I really don't know whether in practice there was not periodically or from time to time some departure, some maybe unusual instance of the vehicle care unit being asked to dispose of an asset other than a vehicle. I really don't know.
And to your knowledge, have you ever been presented or are aware that there's a listing of your motor vehicle listing that would support, I guess, your budget depreciation exercise?
Could you repeat that?
In the case of motor vehicles and as an asset, there would normally be a registry or a register of a listing of those vehicles that would have been, I guess, as a support to any budget exercise for depreciation.
That you'd have to ask the financial secretary. Those sorts of details, Mr. Blake, I simply wouldn't be privy to. I wouldn't have gotten into, as you can imagine.
Okay. My final question then is in regards to the practice that you outlined that has been used. Were there any efforts at any point to look at possibly adjusting the store's orders or any other act or regulation that would help to merge the practice with a written policy, so to speak?
There were amendments to the finance and stores orders during our time. I don't know that they dealt with the omissions, with what Mr. Marshallek has described as holes that needed to be filled. So, with respect to the amendments that were proceeded with, they clearly didn't cover that sort of minutiae.
Just for completeness and to help there, Section 23 of the Finance and Audit Reform Act says the minister may make regulations for giving better effect to the provisions of the act and for prescribing anything that needs to be prescribed. And these specifically refer to proper standards and principles for use and management, public money, financial assets, and liabilities. No regulations were ever prescribed regulating the sale of assets.
Not as far as I know, sir. No. I'm saying that there were these time-honored practices, and I think
yes,
there was no.
This is apart from the very old financial orders and stores orders as amended.
Indeed, sir.
Yes. Well, Mr. Barrow, I'd like you to thank you for coming today. It may be that once certain facts come out, we may wish to have you again, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to press forward this morning with the Financial Secretary and get some clarity on matters that you've explained. So I'd like to thank you for coming. Just reserve the position to have you back if we consider it future.
I will be happy to return at any time, sir.
Thank you.
Certainly want to be helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Abigail. Abigail. Help.
Yes, Gran?
Abigail, I can't breathe well.
Granny, we need to go to the hospital to get you checked out.
No! I'm fine.
Yes, Gran, we need to go now to get you treated. Now, before it's too late.
No, 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 no.
Grandma, we need to go for all of us.
No, no, no.
Stop.
If you are having flu-like symptoms, please call us immediately for medical guidance. If you have chronic conditions such as diabetes, and you are experiencing symptoms such as shortness of breath or chest pain, please also seek medical attention immediately. We lost a lot of people this year. We don't want to lose you too. Please seek help if necessary. Call us at 0800-664-2273. Continue to wear your mask at all times. Keep physical distance when in public and stay at home unless absolutely necessary. This message has been brought to you by the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Get information from a respectable international or official local source. When in doubt of COVID-19 information, verify before sharing or repeating the information. Prepare for COVID-19 with an easy plan of action for yourself and your family to put into practice to avoid or reduce the spread of the illness. Be calm and continue to stay informed of the developments of COVID-19. Adjust your plans where necessary based on official advisories. Your local health authority can provide the best information on whether COVID-19 is spreading in your area. If you become seriously ill with cold or flu-like symptoms, please contact your doctor or nearest health center. For more information, contact the Ministry of Health at our toll-free number 0800-MOH-CARE or through our Facebook pages, the Ministry of Health Belize or the Office of the Director of Health Services. We are here to help you. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. Persons at risk of becoming seriously ill from the flu or the coronavirus, people over the age of 60, persons with medical conditions they already had, such as diabetes or heart disease or conditions that has made their immune system low, such as HIV or cancers. At this time, there is no vaccine or treatment. Serious cases may need oxygen or ventilator support. Be caring and show support for your elderly loved one during this time. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. In response to COVID-19, the government of Belize has implemented strict guidelines on persons to practice social distancing to reduce the spread and risk of getting COVID-19. Practicing social distancing is when one maintains a greater than usual distance away from another person. In public health, it is a practice to prevent sick persons from coming in close contact with healthy people. Recent studies are showing that social distance of 3 feet or more decreases the exposure of COVID-19. Before these restrictions, a person with COVID-19 could infect 2.5 persons in 5 days, 406 persons in 30 days. When you put into practice measures to reduce the exposure activities by half of that one infected person, in 5 days you would possibly only infect 1.25. 30 days, 15 persons. Reduce the exposure of that infected person by 75%. In 5 days, you infect 0.625. In 30 days, 2.5 persons. Remember, the virus does not move on its own. People move it. The more space between you and others, the harder it is for the virus to spread. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health.
Morning, Mr. Wade. Thank you for coming. Mr. Wade, do you prefer to swear or affirm?
I believe
Swear on the Bible?
I believe
Yes.
in the good book, so I will swear.
Yes. Well,
Okay. I, Joseph Wade,
yes.
swear that the testimony I shall give today before this commission in the matters in question shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Mr. Wade, we're here to examine not only what happened in relation to the sale of government assets over the period October 2019 through November 2020, but also to look at the processes that govern that type of activity. Mr. Barrow explained to us the process as he understands it, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to also explain to us how that process works. How is it? Well, let's start with the same question I start with him. Where does legal authority to sell government assets, apart from land, reside? Who has the authority to make the decision whether or not an asset other than land is to be sold, and for how much?
In fact, I was listening to the testimony earlier, and you yourself, Chairman, quoted sections of the Finance and Audit Act.
Yes.
Finance of the store's orders, sections of the store's orders, and their thresholds. And indeed, the Financial Secretary has some authority, but there's a minimum threshold above which it would, items would have to be boarded, and then ultimately the Minister of Finance.
Are you able to say what those thresholds are?
I think I heard the figure of $50,000, but in the case of many of these, it's much below that. So it would have fallen under my
Yes.
authority.
I had found a provision, I think it's 40 in the store's order, that said the accounting officer could sell unallocated stores for up to $50,000, provided that's at a price of 1.25 times the book value of the item. That's what the store's order says. Can you explain what that means to us?
Well, unallocated stores, and we're going back into the 40 or 50 years ago, before my time,
Yes.
there was a, I don't know if it was a department or a unit of the Ministry of the Public Works at the time. It was near the old jail, and there was something called unallocated stores, where items would be bought in bulk and then ultimately issued by requisition to various governments and departments. That's my understanding of unallocated stores.
Yes.
In this case, these are items that were assigned to various ministries, and at the end of the useful life, they're returned for disposal.
So these wouldn't be unallocated stores?
No.
So that provision in the stores
But
orders wouldn't apply?
no, but I would imagine that the thresholds would apply to other government assets as well. Yeah.
As far as you understand it, who has authority to decide whether or not government assets be sold? Where does their authority ultimately reside?
Ultimately with the Minister of Finance, but a certain level of delegation would be to the Financial Secretary. And of course, the overriding concern is whether, one, the items are no longer needed by the government or of use, and two, that the disposal is done in a proper way and the government gets whatever fair residual value those items
Correct.
may have.
I understand that, but for right now, I just want to visit with the issue of authority. The authority would rest with the Minister of Finance, and some authority would have been delegated to the Financial Secretary. Is authority delegated to any other person other than the Financial Secretary to make decisions to sell government assets?
No, not that I'm aware of.
So
No.
the Minister of Finance has the authority and he delegates to the Financial Secretary. Does the head of the vehicle care unit, for instance, have the authority to sell a government asset to decide a price?
On his own, no.
On his own, no. When would he have authority to sell a government asset?
He wouldn't have the authority to sell on his own. He would have
On
to
his
come.
own.
He'd have to come for that authority either to the Financial Secretary, or through me to the Prime Minister, or the Minister of Finance, I should say.
Right, so that in effecting a sale, he is acting as a functionary of either the Financial Secretary or the Minister of Finance.
He's an employee of the government and subject to all the rules and regulations, yes.
Were there any rules and regulations made specifically regulating the sale of government assets other than land?
Nothing specific, guided by the existing stores orders, guided by the existing finance orders, but always with the overarching understanding that the government's assets are, could not be disposed of, one, unless they were no longer of use or needed by the government, and two, that the disposal were done in a fair and transparent manner, and that there would be a fair and reasonable price if sold.
And these regulations or rules that you refer to, and I'm calling them rules, that they would not be disposed of unless no longer needed and at a fair price. At least those two basic rules. Those have never been reduced to written regulations themselves?
No, they're not. I can't point to a regulation with a number on it, but it was generally understood that these were the guidelines and under which the ministry would operate.
Yes. I had searched through the stores orders and the financial orders looking for some regulations, and must confess I wasn't able to find any. Surprisingly, there seem to be a multitude of regulations governing procurement, the purchase of goods, but nothing that really speaks to the sale of goods specifically. Is that your understanding?
Indeed, the emphasis has always been on procurement and getting fair value for money, particularly large contracts and that type of thing, because when it comes to disposal of government assets, oftentimes things languish for a while. You can go to any government department, I believe, or in buildings that, and you see furniture discarded, old copiers, that type of things, and usually the boarding procedure, they're junk. But when it comes to things that have some value, like vehicles that are unserviceable but still may be of value to somebody for parts or scrap or something, but there is no specific guidelines as such.
There's actually a store order for governing the scrapping of vehicles. Okay. That it must be disassembled and the parts done within certain time and all the parts identified.
Well,
I found it curious. I know it sits on paper. I'm not sure that it has any other value.
The store's orders, I think, are dated 1964 or yes. 64, and at that time maybe the government might have had a dozen vehicles in its fleet.
This is true.
Things have changed since then, yeah.
Yes, but the regulations haven't been updated.
No, I mean, it's something that governments come and go, say they wish to do, but have not really had a chance to update.
Well, the most recent one is the Finance and Audit Reform Act, which I believe was introduced in 2008 and amended in 2011. There's a part 4 that deals with government procurement and sale contracts. It's the and sale contracts part that we're interested in. And I read it to the Prime Minister. It says, subject to this act, the government shall have power to acquire, hold, and dispose of by sale or otherwise property of any kind, and all property owned by the government shall be held in the name of the government of Belize. And then 2, it says, government shall have power to enter into procurement or sale contracts, either using the limited tendering procedure, the open tendering procedure, or the selective tendering procedure. It does not make provision for selling otherwise than by way of one or the other of those procedures. Is that your understanding of it?
Yes, but it does give some flexibility. Well, limited tender means you can sole source if you had to. Yes. Selective means you get 3 sources. It's geared more to procurement than sale. But,
yes, but it also applies to sales.
It applies to sale, I agree, yes.
Yes. The open tendering procedure requires that the sale be advertised and invitations accepted from the public as to whether or not they wish to buy.
Indeed.
Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding of the open tender, yeah.
And the selective tendering, there isn't an advertisement to the public, but there's a selection of purchasers who are specifically invited to bid. to buy the item. Is that your understanding of that?
There'll be, to be able to get a fair value of, if you're purchasing or selling, yes.
Yes. Who you invite, it must still result in a competitive environment for the purchase. And the idea, of course, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to understand it as well, is to attract a fair price for the item sold.
Yes.
Yes. And the limited tendering procedure is only available where open or selective have been tried unsuccessfully. And that one means an offer can be made to targeted persons, targeted purchasers. Is that your understanding of it?
Or persons who may see a piece, in the case of a vehicle, may come across a government vehicle that's in a garage somewhere, unknown to us, still in the care of the ministry, not being used sometimes for unfortunate and regrettably to say so, for months, going on years. An interested party may come and say, look, man, I would like to buy this vehicle because I need a part of it or so. Comes to the government and says, I offer you this price. We take a look at it. We determine whether it is reasonable, and we send it up. So in cases, in the practice, it has been that, especially with scrap or near scrap vehicles, we do not advertise. We would entertain, consider bids from people walking in.
I understand that, but you're describing a practice, not regulations. The regulations themselves don't really draw a distinction as to when one or the other of the procedures ought to be followed. Is that so?
Well, again, it depends on the transaction itself. Okay, so, open tender, value. The selective tender, you get a few bids. Limited tender, you accept one. But again, there has to be some assurances that you're getting value for money.
Yes. And that leads me to the next question. Is there an asset register for the government or the equivalent of it where there's a listing of all these vehicles and other assets other than land owned by the government?
Ministries maintain what they call an inventory, and once a vehicle is assigned to a ministry, the ministry should maintain that on their individual. We have in the Ministry of Finance, and every year we ask them to submit to, because we centralize the insurance of vehicles. So we need to know we need to know the extent, the holdings of the government vehicles at any one time to insure them, and also we do a bulk licensing, which is required by law. But every year we should get an updated list of the vehicles. But we don't have a register in the sense of a vehicle with a value at each time. No, because we don't do a accrual accounting. We do a cash accounting. We know the purchase price of a vehicle. Let us say it was purchased last year, 5 years ago, whenever. But the value, because that would just be under our scope and it's not required by law, to do accrual accounting on the vehicles.
Yes. So there's no depreciation calculated, no book value of the vehicle per sale?
No. Basically, it's determined on the condition at the time.
But government doesn't keep track of what the value would be, the value of these assets?
No. I have a government vehicle. There's no log that says the vehicle is 5 years old or 7 years old in my case, and therefore this is the assigned value. No.
No assigned value.
So in regards to the insurance coverage, is that blanket cover up to a certain value regardless of the number of vehicles covered under the policy?
No, sir.
It's per vehicle?
Yes. The government vehicles, just like any other, we are subject to the third-party insurance requirements, and we put out from time to time a tender for the insurance of government's vehicles for third parties. And so we have to comply with the law, no? And every government vehicle should have a license and a sticker up to date.
And third-party coverage doesn't require a value, an assigned value of the vehicle?
No, it's the minimum value of the vehicle. I think, I can't remember, but third-party insurance I think is about $200 or so. I don't know per vehicle.
What's the remit of the vehicle care unit? Do they look after only vehicles, or are they in charge of other property as well?
Well, actually, the proper name of the unit is the Assets and Utility Management. Okay, vehicles being a portion of it, largely vehicles, I should quickly say. But in addition, they also look after the accounts of, particularly when it comes to telecommunications, assigning accounts to various departments and so. They don't pay for them, of course. But I should make a distinction that once a vehicle is purchased, and the purchasing of a vehicle is done by the Ministry of Finance, not by the union, not by the unit. It is then assigned to a ministry, department, and then thereafter, the care, custody, management of that vehicle is the responsibility of the department, and ultimately the accounting officer of the Ministry or Department. So when it comes to the operational use of the vehicle, there seems to be a not with this committee, but that the vehicle care unit is also a vehicle police. No. the use of a vehicle, once it's assigned to a government ministry or a government department, falls to that department. Or the vehicle care unit, which is a sub of this asset and management, utility management, responsible for the insurance, responsible for the licensing. Sometimes we have spot checks in the road to see whether people, just a backup to see whether people are properly licensed, insured, or whether they have proper use of the vehicles at the time. And when it comes to disposal of the assets, they would do so as well.
Yes, this is what we're coming to and want to focus on. Who then decides if and when a vehicle gets sold?
Okay. Once a ministry at any time can request to hand back in a vehicle, which often in the case that they say it has no longer economic use or useful life. Rare, in fact, I can hardly think of any case where a ministry would turn back in a properly working vehicle. Oftentimes they would ask at the same time, almost concurrently, for a new one, a replacement. The Ministry of Finance cannot, and nor the vehicle care unit, cannot select a vehicle from out of a ministry's fleet and say, look, turn this back in because we want to sell it. That doesn't happen. Okay. So what happens is this, often, and actually a vehicle can be turned in at any time. We've seen some ministries take good care of their vehicles, and they have a life of 7 years, depending on the use. But a police vehicle that is on 24/7 mobile patrol, we'll be lucky to get 3 years use out of it. That is not saying that they're abusing the vehicles, although that's a debate I guess we could have on the veranda when we're done, use and abuse of government's vehicles. But my point here is that a ministry will turn in a vehicle back to be disposed of once it comes to its end of its useful or economic life, mostly.
What about vehicles other than unserviceable vehicles? Because those have been sold as well. How are those decisions made?
Well, when I say unserviceable, I mean you've got different categories. You have some that are obviously scrap. You have some that are their only parts value. But you may have some vehicles that are turned in that need major repair, that need, say, a new transmission, a new engine. The ministry does not see it economic to repair the vehicle. It's still running in some cases, but may not see it economic to repair the vehicle. And oftentimes what we have found is in an attempt, we've had cases where we had tried to repair the vehicles, and they go back out on the road, and in 1 month's time or so, another problem. They come to the end of the useful life. If a vehicle has on the engine, on the clock, 200,000, 250,000 miles, the question, it may still be running. Some ministries keep them, some don't. It all depends on the use, and you don't want to put public officers in a transportation that is iffy. So those are turned in, they may still be rolling, but not the economics of the vehicle to continue running. We have, well, all of us, I mean, we have taken vehicles to be repaired with the hope and prayer that you get another lease on life, just to find something else goes wrong once it reaches an age or a condition that is no longer economic.
What about those that are running perfectly fine? Who makes the decision to sell those, and for how much?
Well, the Prime Minister mentioned 3 that vehicles that were, and if they're running fine, and I'm not saying that.
I'm talking about not unserviceable and not of the other category in need of repair as you've described. I'm talking perfectly good vehicles in service of the government. When decision is made to sell them, how are those decisions made?
Well, there must be few and far between, but then again, we go to the Customs Department to get a valuation on the vehicle to see what the proper.
Yes, but who makes the decision as to whether or not they're sold and for how much?
Well, they would first have to be turned back into the vehicle care unit, and you may have information on them, but I can't say.
Well, let's take the one Mr. Barrow used. The judge didn't turn back in his vehicle to anybody. It was working just fine.
No, but that was I think former Prime Minister said it was a special case.
Yes.
So it's a special request to.
Who makes those decisions? You get special requests from time to time?
And ultimately, we look at them, and we take it to the Minister of Finance. But they're few and far between.
Well, there was the judge, and then there was, I believe he mentioned Deputy Prime Minister Hugo Pat.
Right.
Those were special requests?
Indeed.
And the special requests were made directly to the Minister of Finance?
Well, they would ultimately approve. They'd come to me, and I would take it to the minister, discuss whether there's any basis for this consideration, or what the attitude, what the thinking of the government was, the consideration of the government at the time. No?
Mm-hmm. And he also mentioned a package to the former Attorney General. To whom was the request directed, and who made the decision?
I believe that, I believe that the request came to me. By the way, in compliance with the summon, I brought which I will leave, and I want to submit a box.
Yes, we intend to get to that. Yes,
sale of every vehicle, and there's a file there.
Yes.
I believe that there have been a number of them, so I can't recall completely, but I believe the request was given to me, which I then took to the Prime Minister, and they agreed to sell the approval was given to maybe verbal to sell the items in particular.
And how was the price fixed?
I believe we got a assessment from the purchase. We checked on the original purchase price from the ministry for the furniture. I believe to see what was actually paid and depreciated over time. They weren't brand new.
I understand they were fairly new.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it was an offer price. I think the whole thing was $3,500.
Yes, for everything.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Included in that was a laptop computer.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yes, which was a couple of years old, but had been purchased for about $6,000, I think. Do you remember?
I don't. I can't say.
I imagine these numbers are in your box.
Well, certainly there's a file in there on whether it contains the original purchase price. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll certainly get into the details, but for today, I really wanted to get a proper understanding of how it is these decisions come to be made. In the run-up to the general elections, once Parliament is dissolved, is the approval process changed any? Once the government becomes a caretaker government?
No.
No?
And
are there many decisions to sell made during that period?
I can't say. I brought a list of everything that was sold. So you're saying within the month of, say, September?
Yes, once Parliament is dissolved. The one to the Attorney General, for instance, was made 2 weeks before the election. Parliament was dissolved.
But
Do the rules change any?
But the authorities, the authorities given to the ministers remain.
Yes, they are, except they're qualified in that they're in a caretaker capacity at that stage. They're not there to be emptying out everything the government owns. Are there any rules?
I would hardly call the sale of a few things empty, but
No,
I defer to you. I defer to you.
I'm not saying that's what they did.
Yep.
Nor am I accusing them of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
The point I'm making is that the rules should change once that happens. In other places, in other mature jurisdictions, there are actually different rules that apply once Parliament is dissolved. There is a different manual because there is a risk that people will be leaving and there will be an attempt to deal improperly with assets. Do we have special rules to deal with that risk?
I don't believe it. I don't know, and I think I would be.
All right. Do you have with you a total number of vehicles, items that were sold, and a list that was sold during the period?
I do, and I can enter it in. In fact, I had a prepared statement, but I think we covered most of it.
Yes. Can you tell us?
The total number of vehicles sold during the period was 112.
112. And what was the total price?
You got me there. They're all listed.
Yes. I just wanted an idea of the amount of revenue that was involved.
I would say about $300,000 or so, right. Maybe a little more. I didn't have the total. I didn't have the total, but it's here. Okay?
Understood.
Yeah. In addition to the vehicles, there was, I think, 9 laptops, and then the package of furniture, including the 2 items, to the Honorable Attorney General.
Yes. Concerns have also been expressed regarding livestock that didn't make your list.
Livestock?
Yes, from Central Farm. The hauling away of cattle, livestock.
It's news to me, and it wouldn't fall in.
There was a video and a news report.
Well, you know, I have no doubt, but I mean,
yeah.
It didn't come to me, so I can't even.
No, I'm just asking about the procedure. I'm not accusing you of doing anything wrong.
Okay.
How do you deal with that? It seems that the Ministry of Finance doesn't have its eye on that any at all. Is that so?
Well, certainly the livestock would fall to the Ministry of Agriculture, and if they were to sell any asset, be it on the hoof, live, or in some cases something else, it would have that would have had to come to the Ministry of Finance for approval.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
You're not aware of any livestock sold during that year?
No, I'm not at all. I mean, that is.
So the ministry wouldn't have been informed of any of those sales?
I can tell you absolutely not. Yeah.
Well, maybe you can help us with this. Who's the accounting officer in the Ministry of Agriculture that would have been responsible for passing that information along to you?
Well, the accounting officer is the chief executive officer. At the time, I imagine it was Mr. Alpuche, if he knew about it.
You mean sales like that can take place without the chief executive officer knowing about it?
Mr. Chairman, when somebody, and I'm not saying it happened, because...
we're talking
hypothetically.
Rules.
But if somebody breaks a rule, they won't come to tell you and seek permission to break the rule first. So how would you know?
But it seems that it may have been systemic in that there were no rules in place to regulate it in the first place.
But you know, surely basic law and practice is that you can't sell property that's not yours.
Well, this is what I would think.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I have no idea about it. I'm sorry.
So the 112 vehicles sold during the period was about 300,000 and 9 laptops. We don't have a total on that.
I think they went for an average of about $500 each. A laptop has, I'm told, a useful life of about 3 years or so. And we did a back of the envelope depreciation on the laptops.
The Ministry of Finance would have done this?
We looked at the bid, and yes, and if it, we asked how old is laptop, how long you've had it, I mean what use, and most went for like $500-600 each.
So these person bid for these items,
They wrote in and asked to purchase it, yes.
and they suggested a price as well?
Yeah, what they were willing to pay, which wasn't always the price accepted.
And then the ministry reviewed the bid, and then in some cases assessed a different price?
That's correct.
Yes, Mr. Martinez, I don't want you.
Yeah, sure. So out of these 112 vehicles, how many of these vehicles were purchased by public officers, and how many of these vehicles were purchased by the public officers who works at the vehicle care unit?
Mr. Martinez, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I have a list of names. I can't tell by looking at them whether they're public officers or not.
Yeah, so that question came just like the information that Mr. Senior Counsel Marshall had cited in terms of the sale of cattle. We have also received information that public officers had purchased vehicles, public officers who works at the vehicle care unit, and so then just to ask you if that would be considered as conflict of interest.
Well, in reviewing the list, I didn't see any member of the Ministry of Finance, nor did I see any member of the vehicle care assets unit. However, that would not prohibit them from buying a vehicle if it was for sale. Anybody can make a bid on a vehicle.
Yes, we would hope so, if it's advertised and they're given the opportunity.
Yeah, and so our next concern or question would be, when did the practice of, when was the practice of servicing vehicles at the Ministry of Work discontinued, and why?
Servicing vehicles at the Ministry of Works. You know, there was, and I may be revealing my age now, when I joined the public service, there was a mechanical unit at the Ministry of Works, largely to look after heavy equipment, which the Ministry of Works might have had at the time. The government was much smaller in those days. Land Rovers and so was the type of vehicle that the government would use, and they would have stores and spares. But as time evolved, the fleet got bigger, got more complex. The introduction of computer analysis on stores, and it became above the capacity of the garage at the time to do so.
Yeah, so our next question is
might I finish my sentence?
Sure,
please.
carry on. I thought
Thank you. So basically what happened then was that we had to outsource the servicing of vehicles, and oftentimes if you buy a new vehicle from a dealer here in Belize City, there's a warranty, and the warranty has certain restrictions when it comes to actual servicing. If you take it outside of the service area of the dealer, you void the warranty. So there was a number of things leading toward the servicing and repair of vehicles outside of this mechanical unit. And the unit was no longer, when it no longer ceased to function, I can't really say, but I think at least 20, 25 years ago. But please, sir, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, so then how is it that some of these vehicles end up in junkyard mechanic shops around the country?
Well, as I say, and I repeat that the care and servicing, once a vehicle is assigned to a ministry, let us say to the Ministry of Finance, we have a fleet of vehicles, 5, 6, our departments have, but once it's assigned, the responsibility for the care, upkeep, management, use of the vehicle falls to that department. If the vehicle needs repair for whatever reason, the care of that vehicle is still in the hands of the accounting officer or the head of department. It is that, and their finance officers, and their, so if a vehicle goes to a mechanic shop, let us say, for repair, and a certain part is needed, the follow-up, the responsibility, connection is between the department and the mechanics who's supposed to fix it.
Yeah.
What happens at times is that they don't have money to fix a vehicle, or they're waiting for next year's budget or something, and the vehicle stays there and languishes. But we in the Ministry of Finance or the Vehicle Care Unit won't know that because it's not reported to us. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Could I, just to get us back on track, of the 112 vehicles that were sold over the course of the year, how many were sold after Parliament was dissolved in October, in the last month leading up to the election?
I don't know.
Would you care?
I could hazard a guess. It's in the file.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would be that? What would be your guess?
Give me a minute.
Yes.
All of this, of course, will be submitted at the end.
Yes, and we do reserve the right to bring you back to ask you some questions about it, but we're trying to get an idea of the scope of the problem.
Sure. From October of last year?
Yes, October through November.
Through November. I would say about a dozen.
About a dozen. So most of the sales took place in the year before, in the period running up before?
Well before. In fact, sometime in July, I wrote an email directive. I think the Prime Minister might have been mistaken. I have it here, okay, but it was addressed to the head of the asset unit and his deputy, but copied to the Cabinet Secretary, the CEO, the Prime Minister's Secretary, and it's very short, and if you want, I would want to read it to...
This is the one that directed there were to be no sales?
Absolutely, right.
Yes. No, we understand that.
You understand that?
So that was in July?
July, yes.
But notwithstanding that, there were some 12 sales after October?
Sales of running vehicles, the high-end vehicles. This was a directive, not no sales at all. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So of the 12, there were some that were not running?
Yes.
How many?
The classification that they were unserviceable. Actually, they were all classified with the exception of 2 or 3.
Yes, I noticed that.
9.
Even the Attorney General's furniture and laptop were classified as unserviceable. It seems to be a form letter, and that's never taken out.
Well, okay, indeed. It was a form letter for the furniture, yes.
Yes, but that's why. How is that classification made? Who's responsible for making it?
It's determined by the Vehicle Care Unit upon assessment.
So that would be Mr. Vicente?
Right.
And is there any procedure in place for verifying that determination?
Well, when it comes to me, I take it on full faith and credit that the determination is correct. As I do with all my heads of my departments. I mean, by the time the file comes to me, I have to rely on the...
Yes.
Yeah.
So if Mr. Vicente says that it's unserviceable, if it's a brand new car, 3 months old, you wouldn't question that?
Well, I would have a conversation and say, well, look, what's the age, what's the problem? Is it crashed? What's wrong with it? You know?
Yes.
Yep.
So there is a...
I mean,
even if it's cursory.
It's not wholesale. I mean, I don't accept, if a file comes to me and it looks, a question could come, or I need a clarification, I would ask.
Right. So it is reviewed and
Yeah.
verified to some extent by you.
But, you know, I wouldn't leave my desk to go in the yard to take a look at it.
Yes.
I have no competence there. You know? I mean, I can hardly evaluate.
But if something looks clearly off,
yeah,
you
then
question it.
it's your duty, and I have inquired from time to time of what's wrong with this. Oftentimes they would bring pictures to show the crash state of a vehicle.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Are there instances where that process is bypassed, where Mr. Vicente issues the letter on his own?
I can't say I don't think so, but if he did, and I don't have no reason to believe that he did, or how would I know?
Well,
but I don't know. I mean, that is, you know.
This is where your inventory control comes back in. How is the inventory monitored so that you would know if something's been removed from inventory and no letter passed your desk for approval? It's certainly a loophole or a gap in the system. Huh? But then again, you rely on the integrity, the professionalism, the honesty of your staff. Yes, we have to do that, but we also should have systems to
in place to back it up.
To back it up and to make sure that that is so. So the inventory isn't monitored by the Ministry of Finance and verified periodically. There is no stock taking, no verification of your list of vehicles, available vehicles at any point in time.
No, there is what they call annual board of surveys.
Yes, there is.
And then the vehicles in ministries, you know. So there is a check there. But whether they go out into the field and physically cite, for instance, cattle, I don't know.
Yes, yeah. No. And so there's this annual board of surveys, and there would be a list of all the vehicles owned by the government and in use by the public service.
They go into the ministries and they say, okay, our last year's list shows that you had this. We have this additions, whatever it be, furniture, whatever. Let's take a check and see.
Well, I'm not so concerned about the additions. It's the ones that are no longer there that we're trying to figure out what happens.
Where they are, and they will have to say, well, and that's when you might find that a vehicle is in a mechanic shop in some obscure place.
Well, that's what I would think, that this annual system would catch it.
Yep. But it's at the ministry level again, right?
At ministry level.
Yep.
And it's not supervised by the Ministry of Finance?
The reports on the annual board of survey come back to the Ministry of Finance, yes. And I think also the Auditor General.
Yes. Yeah. So if there is some discrepancy, it should be caught in the review of the reports?
It should.
Yes. So of those dozen vehicles that were sold during the month leading up to the general elections, can you identify for us the persons to whom they were sold from your list?
Sure. Beginning in October.
Let's start from the end of September. You have the dates?
The end of September. Okay, let's start from the 28th of September.
Yes.
Good Lord. This list is not. So there was a Nissan X-Trail for one Kenroy Sanchez at $1,200.
What's the name? Sorry, I'm trying to.
Kenroy Sanchez.
Kenroy Sanchez. For how much?
$1,200.
$1,200.
Right, $1,200. There's a Jeffrey Gabriel. 28th of September, a Volkswagen Jetta, a 2007. The X-Trail was a 2013 model. There is a sale to a Doyle Gillette.
The Jeffrey Gabriel was for how much?
$700, I'm sorry.
$700.
There was a sale to a Doyle Gillette on the 28th of September of a 2003 Chevrolet Duramax. I guess Duramax for $3,000.
$3,000?
There was a sale to a Jamal Smith on the 28th of September of a 1995 Nissan pickup truck for $1,200.
These prices would be inclusive of duties and taxes?
Right, because they were larger and serviceable, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Then there is, I said Jamal Smith?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
you stopped at the 1995 Nissan Jamal Smith, $1,200.
There is an Elias Gongara, the 28th of September. There was a batch done at that date. 2007 Hayase van. And that was
Highest,
Heis, thank you. $200.
$200.
I think that was a crashed vehicle. On the 28th of September, there was a sale of 8 unserviceable ATVs. I guess
8 ATVs.
Yeah. 8 ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, I believe they're called. Okay. For total price of $1,600 for the 8.
$1,600 for 8 ATVs.
Yeah.
And who were they sold to?
To Colin Swayze.
Colin Swayze. The government service uses ATVs.
I believe these are
Polaris from police.
No. I think these were. We received these and a donation from the government of India for some little tricycles. I believe them. I don't know.
All right.
Okay. The police don't have Polarises as far as I am aware.
I thought so.
I don't know. One or two.
Which is the next one on your list?
Okay. Again, the 28th of September, there was a Jason Neal, 2 unserviceable ATVs for $400. And then on the 28th of September, there was a Balthazar Goodger, G-O-D.
Balthazar Goodger.
Okay. A 1993 Jeep Cherokee for $1,250. And these have a notation that they're all scrapped and they're cannibalized.
Yes.
That is these ATVs and so. Then in October, there was what do you have here? In October, on the 10th of October, there was all right. I'll take them as they come. On the 14th of October, there was a sale of to an Art Diaz, A-R-T, Art Diaz, of a 2019 Skygo motorcycle for $100.
That one was verified. Any inquiries made by you?
It must have been crashed. I can't.
Well, it seems pretty new for $100.
Yeah, I can find more detail on it. It's in the file. Huh? Okay.
The next one?
Next one, it was on the 7th of October, the vehicle to Justice Sosa, the 2008 Land Cruiser, for $10,385. On the 7th of October.
Hang on, don't pass that so quickly.
Sorry.
$10,308. $85. And that was a valuation fixed how?
By the Customs Department.
Customs Department.
A 2008 Toyota Land Cruiser.
There's a written valuation?
Yes.
Was that described as unserviceable as well?
It's described here, yes.
Yes, unserviceable. And the next one?
There was again the 7th of October, to Colin Griffith, a 2016 Toyota Hilux for $5,000.
This is the Comptroller of Customs.
I believe it is, yes.
There was a valuation from the Customs Department.
I'm not sure.
Not sure about this one.
Yeah, okay. It's in the files.
Okay. The next
Or
one.
not. Okay, on the 7th of October, a Raymond Salazar, a 2008 Toyota Hilux for $6,500.
The 08 sells for more than the 216.
It must have been the condition of the vehicle. Again.
And the next one.
There's a James Maskell, 7th of October, a 2008 Isuzu D-Max for $1,000. Continue.
Yes, please. It's giving us a sense of where we're going.
All right. On the 14th of October, there was the sale to Carla Barnett, a 2018 Isuzu D-Max in running condition.
That one's not described as unserviceable.
No, it's described as
No.
running. And the price there was $21,165.
This is the price you determined.
Customs valuation.
Well, I'm told you rejected that and increased it.
It's possible. It's possible, yeah. Okay. I said James Maskell already?
No, the last one is Carla Barnett. Yes, you said James Maskell already.
Then there's a
The 208 D-Max.
Jerome Williams, a 205 Toyota 4Runner. The date on that is 27th of October.
And Jerome got his for how much?
$2,000.
Yes.
Okay. Then we come to the 4th of November.
So that's October.
Yes. Okay, so the 4th of November. There was a sale to Minister Hugo Pat of a 2020 Toyota Tacoma in running condition for $65,000.
Do you have that letter with you? The approval? I don't believe Mr. Hugo Pat's name appears on it.
Let me see.
We'll leave that for now.
Sure.
Next one.
Okay, the 10th of November, there was a sale to a John Banman of a 2019 Chevrolet Colorado for $5,000. A notation here, it was a crashed vehicle.
Yes.
On the 28th of November, to a Glenford Tillet, a 2005 Jeep Cherokee for $1,500. On the 18th, I'm afraid the dates are a little bit mixed up here. And that's
Yes,
what's giving
that's
me some
fine.
trouble.
Just read them as they appear.
Yeah, okay, 18th of November, to an Alex Jex, a 2008 Hyundai Tucson, I guess it's called,
Yes.
for $2,000. On the 5th of November, so the sequence is a little off, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a Jaime Villanueva of a 2009 Hyundai Tucson for $500. Okay. Let me. And again, I'm a little out of sequence when it comes
Yes.
to the time, but on the 5th of October, there was a Jaime Villanueva.
Again?
Jaime Villanueva.
I think you called his name just now.
Did I? Well, maybe it's a duplicate.
$500, 209 Hyundai Tucson? Or he bought more than one?
So it appears the second one. This is a 2014 Isuzu D-Max for $1,500. On the 1st of October, a 2014 Toyota RAV4 to Wilbert Valleros for $10,000.
This is the Commissioner of Lands?
It's the only one I know with that name, sir.
Yes.
Okay. There's the next in line is a Godwin, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Ocean, O-S-H-E-A-N, a 2014 Malum motorcycle for $50. On the 9th of October, sorry, I got it wrong. I believe I've captured them all, sir.
All right.
And when I said 12, I was looking at from October. We went into to September just now.
September, yes. There
Yeah,
was
so-
a block of 8 with one.
So in that 12 is now 20, huh? So,
We won't hold you to it.
No,
We'll review the papers.
of course, okay.
But we wanted a sense of what exactly transpired leading up to the election.
Sure. But I can tell you, if you, that we did, leading up to the election, we did retain several, didn't sell them. Requests had come in from ministers, requests had come in from CEOs, retained, didn't sell, except ones mentioned. We didn't sell them, and we had in the yard 19 vehicles that were running and operating, and those were turned over to the new government.
Yes, and this is after the unions had raised the alarm about the cheap sale of vehicles back in September.
I have no idea.
When was possession of those 19 vehicles taken?
Well, they would have been turned in. They would have been turned in the last days of the government.
In the last days?
But my directive was dated from July.
Yes. July directive. Are you aware if any of these vehicles that were sold were advertised to the public for sale?
I don't think so. No.
None of them?
No.
I see public officers of certain rank were given opportunity to buy their vehicles. Mr. Colin Griffith and Mr. Wilbert Valleros. Is there a policy governing the sale of vehicles to officers, public officers above a certain rank or to public officers generally?
No, no policy, no.
Is there a policy of selling vehicles to, I know that in the case of Mr. Griffith, and I think the whole country is aware that he has left service of the department, that outgoing public officers get to purchase vehicles they use?
Well, the practice has been in the past that public officers would ask to take their vehicles, and depending on the circumstances, the government would have considered as a thank you. But given the particular times, we try to hold that down.
But it was still done in a number of instances.
It would seem so, yes.
And the consideration for that is largely the benefit to the public officer rather than the financial detriment to the country. It's a way of giving him something when he leaves as a benefit to him.
Well, you know, it's not a giveaway. You know,
$5,000 for a Hilux?
I don't know the condition of the vehicle.
Well, we'll find out.
Okay.
But is it viewed as a way of conferring benefits on outgoing public officers?
In some cases, it's a thank you, yes.
Yes, in some cases, like in the case of the judge.
Yes, as the Prime Minister said, yeah. Former Prime Minister.
Are there any regulations, financial orders, store orders, any regulations whatsoever governing the gifting of assets to outgoing public officers?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
The sale to the outgoing Attorney General of the items of furniture and his computer equipment, what was the motivation for that from the government's perspective?
He wrote and asked for them. We tried to check to see whether they were of any particular of any particular use. He made the point that some of the furniture was customized. That's my word. And again, it was, as the former Prime Minister said, it was, in a sense, a thank you for doing two jobs.
Well, I understand that, except that he was still in the job when it was approved to him, and there was no expectation that he was leaving the job, or was there?
Well, he wasn't running for office.
Yes, but the UDP administration, the members that formed it, was still running for office.
True.
It was expected that they would lose?
I can't say.
Well, why then? What then justifies the request for emptying out the office and taking home the computers, other than an expectation that he would not be returning?
He may have determined not to continue with the government.
So he had resigned his position as Attorney General, or anticipated so resigning?
I can't speak for him. I don't know.
Yes. My difficulty is that in the month leading up to the general election, nobody knows what will happen. Why is there a rush to buy assets, or why is there any motivation, let's not say a rush, to buy office furniture and computer equipment on the part of CEOs and Attorney Generals and Commissioners of Lands and Controllers of Customs? Why would they even contemplate that they would need these things and need them in their personal names?
They may have decided I can't speak for them, but they may have decided that they were coming to the end of their career with the government.
Yes. And from the ministry's perspective, in approving these sales, the ministry would have concurred in their assessments, would have agreed that they were coming to their terms and so needed these items?
Well, many had indicated to me that they were, privately, that they were preparing to leave.
Well, I think those are the questions for me from now. Mr. Martinez, anything further? Mr. Blake?
Is there a standard useful life listing for assets or a policy or practice?
There is no written manual that indicates useful life. A lot of it depends really on the, we look at the condition of the item really. And depending on the use of vehicle, for instance, a vehicle, a useful life of a vehicle assigned to the police department, say, for patrols, we're lucky to get 3 years out of it. It depends on the number of drivers and heavy use of the vehicles. A vehicle assigned to an individual should last 5, 6, 7 years. A department pool vehicle, it depends on the heavy use and the extent of the use of the vehicle. Similarly with a laptop, you figure a laptop has a useful life of 3 years, maybe 4. Depreciated straight line, you know, in doing the calculation. But there's no manual that says that a phone, well, that may not be a good example, but a vehicle has to have a useful life of say 7 or 10 years. It depends on the condition and the work to which the vehicle is put.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
You?
Yeah. Yeah, so how does the Auditor General audit and inspect all assets to ensure that we have fair market value on the assets before their disposal? We know that the Auditor General plays a role in this.
Before the disposal, the Auditor General, sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yeah. Does the Auditor General, the Audit Department, inspect all assets to ascertain a fair market value of the assets before disposal?
No.
So what's the purpose of the vehicle care unit if the departments are required to keep their own inventory, the listings of these vehicles?
Well, I think I mentioned that the vehicle care unit is responsible for the insurance, licensing. From time to time, they participate in checks of vehicles on the highway. They put up, along with to ensure or to inquire whether the weekend before holidays, that type of thing. And also then to dispose of the items once they're turned back surrendered by the department to which it was assigned. But once they're still in the possession, if that's the word, of a department, the care and responsibility and proper use falls to that department.
No further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wade. What we'll do is we'll review the documentation you've provided. We'll go through them carefully, and if there are any questions arising from them, then of course we'd ask you to come back. But for today, I think we've gotten a good sense of where things are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Commissioners, thank you. Okay, and of course I'll be able and willing to come back at any time. No.
Thank you. Yes, we'll get it.
Leave it here?
Thank you.
Okay. And
that's a list.
Stay healthy while traveling. Frequently wash hands with soap and clean running water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Avoid close contact with persons suffering from any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel if you have any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel unless absolutely necessary to any location that currently has local spread of the COVID-19. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or nearest health center and share your travel history. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health. Reduce your risk of viral illness like the flu or the coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water or with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing or sneezing with a tissue. Throw away and wash hands immediately. Avoid close contact with anyone who has the cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or nearest health center and share your travel history. A health and wellness message from your Ministry of Health.
The uncertainties surrounding coronavirus disease may be stressful for children. They may react to fear and anxiety, which may lead to negative changes in their daily activities and behavior as a natural response to a stressful event. Some changes to watch out for in children include excessive crying or irritation in younger children, excessive worry or sadness, acting out behaviors such as temper tantrums, poor school performance or avoiding school, difficulty with attention and concentration, and avoidance of activities enjoyed in the past. There are things you can do to support your child. Take time to talk with your child about the COVID-19 outbreak. Answer questions and share facts in a way that your child can understand. Explain to your child the meaning and importance of social distancing. Also reassure them that it's for their own benefit and for those around them, especially older family members like their grandparents. Share with them how you deal with your own stress so that they can learn how to cope from you. Limit your family's exposure to news coverage, as children may misinterpret what they hear and can become frightened about something they do not understand. Try to keep up with regular routines. Create a schedule for learning activities and fun, relaxing activities. Take breaks, get plenty of sleep, exercise, and eat well. Deal with the COVID-19 calmly and confidently, as children in part react based on what they see from the adults around them. This is a message from the Ministry of Health.